He didn't just manipulate her life, he medically engineered her reality. Victor's behavior is not simple greed. It is classic coercive domination, isolation, sedation, dependency, and emotional conditioning disguised as care. Elena's fake pregnancy is the masterstroke, an artificial bond designed to soften resistance and destabilize identity. From a clinical lens, she is not merely betrayed, she is reshaped into an ideal victim. But the most disturbing detail is this. Once awareness returns, trauma does not make her collapse. It reorganizes her into a highly functional threat.
Behold Elena Moretti, a spectral presence outside her husband's study, her palm fused to a doorknob, a boundary she is forbidden to breach. Through the wood she can hear Victor's voice, a calm recitation of the mechanics for her own murder. Clutched in her hand is a pregnancy test, once a symbol of life, now the tombstone of a future that will not be born. The true horror, however, is the sound of laughter from within, a toast to the masterful manipulation of her entire world. Her fortune, her womb, her very being. She was a signatory to a pact where the fatal terms were written in invisible ink. The ultimate cruelty, her love was the pen that signed away her life. To see how a trusting soul is forged into a weapon, you must first watch her break. If this narrative grips you, please offer your support and mention in the comments where you are watching from. We find ourselves in the crushing weight of a Boston evening in October as a relentless downpour turns the city into a labyrinth of black, reflective ice. Elena Moretti melts into the townhouse shadows, soaked to the bone, her breath catching from a chill that has nothing to do with the weather. She is not supposed to be here. This is a tear in the fabric of her life. Her script placed her in Cambridge at a tense dinner with her sister Maria, deflecting questions about the hollows under her eyes, her shrinking waistline, and the tremor in her fingers when she thinks no one is looking. But Elena left her medication behind. The little white pills Victor set out for her each morning, supposedly to quiet her anxious mind. Dr. Hammond wrote the prescription 6 months ago, the exact point at which her world started to blur at the edges. Victor had been the picture of the concerned husband, ensuring she never missed a dose. It was this oversight that sent her back into the storm, up the service stairs after slipping through a side door. The bottle was right where it should be. It was only as she turned to leave that she heard the voices seeping from Victor's study. A room that should have been silent. He had told her he was working late, closing the Castellano deal. That morning, he had promised her peace with a kiss on her forehead and a soft reminder to take her medicine. Yet the voice was undeniably his, and he was not alone. The other was Marco, Victor's head of security, a man whose character was etched in the scar that split his brow and the bruised shape of his knuckles. A sane woman would have fled, taken her pills, and driven back to Maria's, forcing the night's strange events from her mind. But an instinct pulled Elena toward the sound. The heavy study door, a relic from the 1890s, was always locked. Tonight it hung slightly ajar, a dark slit revealing a pit of betrayal. Through it, Victor's voice cut like a scalpel. "The timing is critical." He used that particular tone when untangling difficult knots, a sound Elena had once found irresistible. One day sooner, the inheritance clause is invalid. One day later, the board starts asking pointed questions. "The sister?" Marco's voice was a low rumble. "Maria's getting curious, asking Elena how she's feeling. Maria is a non-issue. She has no legal claim on Moretti shipping. Once Elena dies, I inherit everything of the grieving husband. That's already settled." The room began to spin around Elena. The pill bottle slipped from her grasp, her fingers snagging it just inches from the floor, silencing the sound of her discovery. Her hands shook with such force she almost lost her hold again. And the pregnancy? A third voice asked, younger and less sure. What if they demand an autopsy? There is no pregnancy, Victor said, his tone as flat as a eulogy. Dr. Hammond's HCG injections worked as planned. For 8 weeks, Elena has had every necessary symptom. The morning sickness, the fatigue, the wild emotions. By the time it occurs to anyone to check, it will be irrelevant. The entire foundation of Elena's world fractured. 8 weeks. 8 weeks of him holding her hair back while she was sick. He had driven her to Dr. Hammond's office himself, waiting like a devoted saint while the sham tests were performed. She had cried when she heard the lie, flooded with relief that their shared hope was becoming real. She cried for the family she could finally have with Victor, a replacement for the one she'd lost in the car accident. That night, Victor had whispered that their life was about to be perfect as he held her. The medicine keeps her compliant. It was Marco again. It does more than that. It keeps her passive. The sedatives and hormones maintain a constant mental fog. It has simplified things beautifully. A soft chuckle drifted through the door. It was the younger man, Elena was sure. She honestly doesn't suspect a thing. Elena has never suspected anything. Victor's voice was now dripping with the contempt that squeezed the air from Elena's lungs. That was always her best quality. Sweet, gullible Elena Moretti, barely 24, orphaned at 22, and left with a shipping empire she was totally unfit to run. The board, her father's old cronies, were circling. She was desperate for a savior to handle things. And you were ready to play the part, Marco stated. I was a realist. Enzo Moretti gave 40 years to that business. His daughter would have destroyed it inside of 6 months. Our marriage was a transaction that served us both. Except she thinks you're completely in love with her. Elena believes whatever reality I build for her, she's lived in it for 2 years. 2 years of a flawless act as the loving husband, a show set to end in 3 weeks. Elena's back slid down the cold wall as her legs gave out beneath her. This time the pill bottle fell from her hand for good, rolling away into the darkness without a sound. The only noises left were the raging storm and the frantic, pounding rhythm of her own heart. 3 weeks, the younger voice said. You're certain of the method? A car accident, Victor replied, his voice empty of all feeling. She's been on those pills for months. Her reaction time is 0. All it takes is a wet night, a sharp turn on Starro Drive, and a minor prearranged mechanical issue. Marco's crew will manage the details. And what if they investigate? They won't. The story is airtight. A pregnant, emotionally distraught Elena Moretti loses control on a stormy night. A tragedy. I, of course, will be shattered. The media will devour it. Shipping heiress killed in devastating crash. Husband vows to honor her legacy. I'll have Moretti shipping folded into the Moretti Castellano group within the month. The Castellanos are involved? Antonio Castellano greenlit this from the start. It was his idea, actually. He needed our Atlantic lanes. I needed his corporation. Elena was just the acquisition cost for both of us. The young man whistled softly. That is brutally cold. It is finance, Victor corrected. It was never personal. Elena shoved her hand against her lips, swallowing the bile that rose in her throat and strangling the scream that was tearing its way out. Never personal. 2 years of building a life, of thinking his touch meant something, that his words were real. 2 years of making herself smaller to be the quiet wife he wanted. letting her father's work become a distant memory. Every single moment had just been a step toward her own execution. The baby was a ghost. The child she had imagined, the future she had mapped out, was nothing but a cruel fiction. The pills she had swallowed on faith, believing they were medicine, were a slow, methodical poison. They were just another tool of command, a way to make her calmer, more expendable. 3 weeks. In 3 weeks, Victor would put her in a car and have her murdered in it. "When do we handle the signatures?" Marco asked. "Tomorrow. I need Elena to sign the updated will, the one that makes me the sole heir and executor. She'll sign. She signs anything I put in front of her these days." This was the horrifying truth. Elena could not remember the last time she'd even looked at a contract before signing it. Victor would always brush it off as routine legal matters, boring administrative tasks, and her trust in him had been absolute. The drugs left her so confused and exhausted, it was just easier to smile and write her name where he pointed. She had effectively authorized her own murder, likely thanking him for his help while she did it. "What if she says no?" the younger man asked. "She won't. But if by some chance she does, we have backup plans. The schedule would get complicated, but the final result is the same. One way or another, Moretti shipping becomes mine before the end of the year." Elena's fingers finally found the pill bottle on the floor, her hand wrapped around its small, heavy shape. The bottle's label read lorazepam, a prescription for anxiety, for panic attacks she'd never had until 6 months ago. She had shouldered the company, the weight of her parents' graves, the crushing force of the board. Weary, yes, but whole. Then came Victor's suggestion. See Dr. Hammond, his trusted friend, a man who could offer solace. The pills started. A chemical twilight descended, and Elena Moretti began to fracture, piece by agonizing piece, until her own reflection was that of a total stranger. "Is she in her room now?" a young man's voice inquired. "No, with her sister. She is not expected back until late." The leather chair groaned as Victor rose, his thoughts already a constellation of Castellano contracts and shipping routes. As his footsteps faded toward the study, a primal shock coursed through Elena, sending her flying toward the servants' stairs with a speed she hadn't felt in years. Behind her, a door clicked open. "Marco, bring the car. We meet Antonio at the club in an hour." "Understood, sir." Elena reached the landing, dissolving into the deep shadows of the architecture as the men's presence consumed the space below her. The sound of Victor's stride was the cadence of absolute power, answered by the heavy tread of Marco's boots. A front door opened and slammed shut, the end of a command. An engine ignited, its roar dissolving into a heavy silence. Elena hung in that stillness, counting to 100, then 2. Convinced they were gone, she descended on legs that felt like severed strings, pulled back to the study. The air, thick with Victor's rich cologne and old leather, was the very atmosphere of control. His mahogany desk was a monolith, stacked with papers beside a laptop she knew was a digital fortress. On the walls hung books he hadn't read and wedding photos. A luminous Elena, smiling a beautiful lie, and Victor, his hand and owner's claim on her waist. His smile perfectly predatory. She stared at that false memory, then turned her focus to the desk drawers. The first 3 were locked fortresses. The fourth, however, gave way. Inside were files bearing the names of empires. Moretti Shipping, Castellano Group. She laid them out across the desk, a map of acquisitions, projections, and takeovers. But underneath them all, a single folder was marked E.M. Estate. A tremor began in Elena's hands as she opened it. Inside was the architecture of her own undoing from the last 6 months. A new will, power of attorney, transfer deeds. It was a collection of her own signature, turned into a weapon against herself. Every signature was a nail driven into the coffin of her life. Each page had methodically stripped her of her power. At the very bottom lay the final piece, an unsigned will transferring her entire inheritance to him. A small, cold note was attached. Get E to sign by October 15th. Today was the 8th. 1 week remained. He was staging the final act of her obliteration. Elena fell into Victor's chair, the leather still warm from the man plotting her erasure. She stared at the pages, at the construct of a lie she had inhabited. Every kiss, every touch had been nothing more than performance. Every whispered promise had been a perfectly engineered falsehood. His proposal in the shadow of her parents' funeral, a vow to never leave her alone, his seizure of power in meetings, shielded by her grief, his assurance that Dr. Hammond's pills were healing her. That all would be fine. It was all a magnificent, cruel stage play. And in that moment, Elena saw that her hands were still. The tremor that had been her constant companion for months was simply gone. She looked at the pill bottle, rose, and walked to the bathroom, emptying every single tablet into the toilet. She watched the white pills swirl down the drain, a vortex pulling away the plot to extinguish her. The woman in the mirror was different, her face carved with a terrible new clarity. The fog was lifting from her mind, replaced by the cold, sharp understanding of what she was, a ghost in her own house. For months she had been a specter, but she was not yet banished. Elena returned to the study, took out her phone, and began photographing every single page, every clause, every signature, each component of the machine Victor built to destroy her. Then she put it all back, exactly as it had been. When she was done, her hands were steady as granite, her mind sharper than it had been in half a year. She locked the study, climbed the stairs to the bedroom she shared with a monster, and packed one bag. It held only clothes, cash, and a passport. She left the jewelry he had given her, his gilded chains. The credit cards were a liability. He watched them like a hawk. She took her mother's wedding ring, the final piece of her true self, and the bottle of prenatal vitamins Dr. Hammond prescribed for a fictional pregnancy. Elena stopped at the door, gazing at the golden cage she was about to flee, the massive bed with its silk sheets. The closet was a museum of clothing curated and approved by him. The vanity was a stage for the daily ritual of swallowing the pills that kept her mind clouded and compliant. The self-loathing was a blade. So foolish, so naive. Not again. Elena killed the lights and left. She drove to an anonymous hotel across town, paid in cash, and turned off her phone. Sitting on the bed, she let the truth wash over her. The acid of betrayal, the white-hot rage, and the freezing terror of how close he had come to simply making her disappear. Then she opened her laptop and began to hunt for a name. Adrian Keller, Victor's greatest rival, the man he had utterly destroyed. If anyone on Earth wanted Victor Moretti ruined, it was Adrian Keller. Elena found his company site, Keller Maritime, New York headquarters, a smaller, hungrier operation than hers, with shipping lanes into Europe and Asia. She found his email address on a 3-year-old press release. Then at 2 a.m, with rain beating against the glass and her world in ashes, Elena Moretti wrote to a man she did not know. Mr. Keller, my name is Elena Moretti. In 3 weeks, my husband will kill me for my company. I have the proof. If you want to see him destroyed, meet me tomorrow. I can show you all of it. EM. She sent it before hesitation could poison her resolve. She then lay back, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the old version of herself to burn away. By dawn, Adrian Keller replied. His message was brief. A South Boston address and time 2 p.m. Elena got there early. The warehouse was a place that would have terrified her last week, a skeleton of broken brick and shattered windows that smelled of brine and decay. She parked in the empty lot, holding the folder of photographs she'd printed, and went inside. Adrian Keller was there, waiting in the ruin of an office. His back was to her as he looked out a filth-streaked window at the water. Mrs. Moretti. His voice came without him turning. You are either a woman of immense courage or immense desperation. Both, Elena answered, her own voice sharp. That made him turn. He was younger than she expected, maybe 35, with dark hair and eyes that dissected everything they saw. His suit was worth more than her car, and he looked at her like she was a problem he was about to solve. You said you had proof. Elena pushed the folder across the rusted desk between them. It is all in here. Asset transfers, a statement from the doctor about my fabricated pregnancy, financials linking him to the Castellano family. He plans for my death in 3 weeks, maybe less. Adrian picked up the folder and began to read. His face was a neutral mask, but his eyes held a new light, a flicker of cold, calculating interest. Why come to me? Because you hate him, Elena said, her voice raw truth. He took what was supposed to be yours, and now he is taking all that is mine. My research showed you are the only one with the motive and the means to help me. Help you do what? His ruin. The words were like ice. Take it all from him. His company, his reputation, his liberty. I want him to lose everything, the same way he planned for me to lose my life. Adrian put the folder down. And my incentive? Moretti shipping. Once Victor is gone and I have control, I will sell the entire company to you. Half the company's worth. The Atlantic routes you've chased for years would finally be yours. The proposition was stunning in its generosity. A balanced trade. My continued existence for the prize you've always craved. Adrian watched her, his silence a long, dissecting gaze. Elena met it, refusing to break, refusing to show the terror that burned beneath her cold fury. Do you understand what this entails? He finally spoke. This is more than a corporate takeover. Your husband has powerful friends. The Castellanos, for starters. They will not watch their asset burn. I am aware. You'll have to go back to that house, to him, and you must be the perfect loving wife while we assemble our attack. Are you capable of playing that part? He questioned. The image of pills swirling down a drain bloomed in Elena's mind. The fog lifting, that soft, docile, sleepwalking woman she had been for 2 years, that version of her was buried. Yes, she replied, the word a razor. I am. A predator's smile crept across Adrian's face. Very well, Mrs. Moretti. We have a pact. Let the performance begin. He offered his hand. She took it. A logical voice screamed in her head that she was merely trading one captor for another. But that was a problem for a future Elena. This one had a husband to fool and a life to win back. The operation ignited, materializing over 3 days. Adrian, she found, was terrifyingly swift. Adrian's influence was a web on a scale Elena could hardly fathom, spun from lawyers, investigators, and operatives who unearthed buried truths. Within 48 hours, they had more than pictures. They had bank records revealing Victor's gambling disease, one that festered long before their marriage. They had his texts with Antonio Castellano outlining the entire Moretti deception. They even had receipts for the drugs that created her illusion of pregnancy. And Dr. Hammond was no doctor at all, but a disgraced assistant whose license was revoked for fraud, paid in cash by Victor for 2 years. Your husband, Adrian remarked, is a rank amateur. He made this judgment in a sterile high-rise, a glass and steel world away from the grit of their first meeting. His fatal flaw is arrogance, Adrian elaborated. He was certain you were incapable of fighting back. I was, Elena admitted quietly. Not until I heard the plan for my own execution. That is about to change. A small box slid across the table. A new phone, secure, for my calls only. Your current one stays on for show. Victor cannot know you've gone dark. Elena picked up the device. But the will needs my signature. And he will have it. What? We need him to believe his dominion is absolute. If you resist now, he will sense the change. He'll speed up his timeline or find another way. But if you sign, if you play your part to perfection, he will taste his triumph. And that is when men like him get sloppy. A cold knot of fear tightened in Elena's stomach. To sign her own death warrant was pure insanity. I know the weight of this request, Adrian said, his voice shifting to pure, cold logic. We are not letting him kill you, Elena. We are letting him believe he can. There is a world of difference, and if he deviates from our script... I call you, she finished for him. Adrian's eyes locked with hers. Any hour of any day, you're not alone in this anymore. That promise should have been a comfort, but it felt like swapping one cage for a larger one. Nevertheless, Elena nodded, seeing no other choice. She returned to the mansion that night. Victor was in his study, buried in paperwork. He glanced up, his face breaking into the practiced smile she had once believed was real. Elena, I was growing concerned. Maria said you left hours ago. I went for a drive, Elena said, her voice engineered to sound weak and lost, a flawless echo of her old self. I had to clear my head. Are you okay? You look pale. Just tired. The baby. She paused, her hand rising to her stomach in a gesture rehearsed to instinct. Yeah, I think I'll go lie down. Victor rose, rounding his desk to place his hands on her shoulders. Elena fought a full-body, visceral command to shrink from his touch. You've been overdoing it, he chided gently. I'm always telling you to rest. I know, you're right. She forced herself to receive his embrace, the smell of his cologne, once beloved, now sickening. I'm sorry for being so difficult. You're never difficult. He kissed her hair. You are my wife. My job is to protect you. The lie was a silken, effortless river flowing from him. Elena pulled back with a fragile smile. I should take my pill. I forgot this morning. A tiny spark lit Victor's eyes. It might have been satisfaction. I left them on your nightstand. Make sure to eat something. I will. Upstairs, she locked herself in the bathroom and retched until she ached. Splashing water on her face, she faced her reflection and whispered, 3 weeks. You just have to survive 3 more weeks. That day's pill went into the toilet with the rest. She flushed and then descended to begin the role of a lifetime. The following 2 weeks were a master class in feigned submission. Elena smiled on command. She signed the will he produced, her hand trembling with just enough engineered fear then watched him file it away with an air of smug completion. She tolerated dinners with the Castellanos, playing the part of the vapid trophy wife while Antonio and Victor plotted. The nights, though, were reserved for Adrian. They were weaving together information, designing the legal assault, and mapping every player in Victor's corrupt world. Adrian's lawyers were readying injunctions to seize Victor's empire the second Elena gave the command. Timing is the essential part, Adrian emphasized in a late meeting. Act too soon and he'll lock this up in court for a decade. Act too late and you're dead. We have to strike in one perfect moment. And when is that? It's the instant he is absolutely certain he has won, the moment his guard is completely down. Elena saw the strategy's cruel beauty. It was a reflection of Victor's own method. Lull your victim into a false sense of safety, then strike their weakest point. She was learning her enemy's craft. The notion should have repulsed her. Instead, it felt like reclaiming power. There is something else, Adrian said one evening, a week before the staged accident. They were in his office, the city lights a scattered jewel field below. Something you need to accept? What is it? When this is done, when Victor is gone and you have your company back, you will not be the one to run it. Elena stiffened. What are you talking about? You are 24, you have no experience, no training. The board's loyalty is to Victor's power. Take him away, and they will descend like wolves, with you as the kill. And the alternative? I surrender my inheritance to you? It was the deal we struck. The deal was a sale, not a total surrender. Adrian's posture shifted as he studied her. You've changed since we met. There's a hardness to you now. I stopped taking the medicine that made me a ghost. This is what was underneath. It's more than that. He paced to the window, a dark silhouette. You have a rage now, a useful tool if it doesn't consume you. Moretti Shipping needs a real leader. And that isn't you. Not yet. The words hit with the weight of truth. For 2 years, Elena had been a signature, an heiress whose only job was to sign her name. The mechanics of a global corporation were a mystery to her, but mysteries could be solved. Later, she said, after Victor is gone, I'll learn. A strange look passed over Adrian's face that unsettled her. As you wish. They returned to the plan, but the conversation lingered. It was a vile pattern, realizing that removing Victor only meant installing a different master. But survival came first. On the coup's final evening, sleep was impossible. Lying beside Victor, she heard him breathe and saw him acting out his false grief at her funeral. At 3 a.m, she slipped out of bed into the house's crushing silence. In the kitchen's gloom, she stared at her mother's garden, now a cemetery of weeds. The burner phone lit up. Are you ready for tomorrow? Adrian's text appeared. As ready as I will ever be, she typed back. Remember, the roles have reversed. He thinks he's the hunter, unaware you are the one who built the trap. She put the phone down and returned to the bed. As she lay down, Victor stirred. Can't you sleep? No. Elena let a tremor enter her voice, a final performance of terror. I'm having the most awful nightmares. About what? About dying. Victor's arms enclosed her. She felt the phantom curve of his lips press into her hair. You are not going to die, Elena. I promise. A falsehood so practiced, so hideously perfect. Elena closed her eyes, marking the seconds until this grim play ended. Dawn broke with a cruel, sudden light. As Elena opened her eyes, Victor was already dressed, knotting his silk tie as his reflection watched from the mirror. He caught her gaze and offered that counterfeit smile she had grown to loathe. "A pivotal day," he announced. "Finalizing the Castellano contracts. I should be done by 6, then a quiet dinner just for us." "That sounds lovely," Elena replied, her voice a fragile performance as she sat up. "I have my doctor's visit. Hammond at 2, he affirmed. The so-called checkup. Victor bent, pressing a cold kiss to her brow. "Call me after. I need to know you and our baby are well." The child that wasn't, the visit that would never happen, a stage for his claim. Elena only nodded, her ears tracking his receding step, the door's final click and the sound of his engine fading. She then produced the encrypted phone. Adrian's voice was instant, sharp. "Is he gone?" "Yes, he's convinced I have a doctor's appointment at 2:00. "Perfect. The afternoon is ours. Marco is on him. The second he meets the mechanic, we'll have the final piece." Elena's knuckles were stark white against the phone's black case. "And if this falls apart—" "It won't. Trust the plan." Faith was a currency she no longer possessed, but every other path had closed. She dressed and drove to an address Adrian provided, not his fortified office, but a sterile law firm, a neutral ground with cameras and witnesses. Adrian was waiting, flanked by 2 strangers, a woman in her 50s with eyes that dissected everything they saw, and a younger man whose world seemed to exist only behind the glow of his screen. Elena Margaret Chen, my lead counsel. Paul Reeves, our forensic accountant. Adrian indicated the chairs around a severe conference table, the war room for their coming assault. As Elena sat, a storm of fear raged inside her, warring with her composed exterior. Margaret began. "Our case against Victor is ironclad. We have fraud, conspiracy, and attempted murder." The proof was damning, she said, but their approach had to be like a scalpel. Meaning what, exactly? It meant they would bypass the courts entirely. Victor's web was too vast. The Castellanos were an empire. The legal system would become a maze where evidence simply vanishes. "Then what's the plan?" Paul turned his laptop, angling the screen toward Elena. A spiderweb of financial crimes bled across the display. "We leak this," he stated. "Not police, but straight to the board of Moretti Shipping." This was their checkmate. To ruin Victor in the one court he feared, the court of his peers. Their goal was to incinerate his reputation before he could utter a single defense. "And after that," Margaret's voice was grim, "he'll be a man with nothing left to lose. That makes him more dangerous, which is why you'll be in a secure location." Elena cut her off. "No, I'll be there. I want to see his face when he realizes I was the one who destroyed him." Adrian spoke her name. "Elena?" She held his gaze, her voice a blade of tempered steel. "I will be there. He tried to steal my company and to kill me. I will not hide while others fight this war for me." A heavy silence filled the room. Margaret and Paul traded a glance. Adrian's expression was a blank slate. "Fine," he finally agreed. "You'll be present, but you will follow our instructions to the letter. No deviations. The second things get unstable, you are out. Understood?" "Understood." Margaret slid another file across the table. The timeline. "We've set an emergency board meeting for next week, called by you as majority shareholder. Victor knows nothing." "How could you—" "I forced the meeting," Adrian cut in, "with proxy votes I've been gathering for the last 6 months. From small shareholders whose trust in Victor had begun to crack. Not enough for a takeover, but just enough to demand a meeting." Elena just stared, the sheer scale of his strategy finally becoming clear. "You've been planning this for 6 months." "I've been planning this since your husband stole what belonged to me," Adrian said, his tone like ice. "Your situation was just the perfect trigger." So that was it. Not a rescue, a hostile takeover. Adrian's revenge was a loaded gun, and Elena had become the bullet. A truth she had always suspected. "And for tonight?" she asked. "Victor expects my car to crash." "Let him," Paul said, showing a grainy traffic camera feed. "We have Marco under our watch. The moment he makes contact with the mechanic hired to sabotage your car, we'll record it all. You won't drive tonight. You take our car. If Victor asks, you felt sick. A plausible excuse, the baby's sake. He'll suspect something." "Maybe, but his arrogance is his greatest weakness. A single day's delay won't stop his plan. He will just reschedule." Elena tried to believe it, that Victor's own ego would be what destroyed him. But she had trusted him once, a lifetime ago, and the memory of that betrayal was a fresh wound. They spent another hour dissecting every possible scenario and response. When she finally left, a painful thrumming began behind her eyes, and a tremor returned to her hands. It was not a symptom of her medication, but the crushing weight of what was to come. She drove home but sat in the driveway, unable to force herself inside. The house was now a monument to her own mistakes. Every room held a memory, each one poisoned. The kitchen, the scene of his false joy over their phantom child. The bedroom, the stage for his intricate lies. The study, the theater where he orchestrated her death. Upstairs, she changed her clothes and settled in to wait. At 6:30, she heard his car. She heard the door, the familiar echo of his steps as he searched the house for her. She stood still in the bedroom, a dark shape against the window pane, her eyes seeing nothing. "Elena?" His frame filled the doorway. "Are you okay?" "Just tired." She didn't look at him. "The checkup took a long time. Is our baby all right?" "Dr. Hammond says everything's fine. I just need to rest." She could feel the tension leave his body, then heard his approach, his hand on her shoulder. "Good. I worry." The lie came to him as easily as breathing. Elena turned, met his eyes, and summoned tears. "I love you. You know that, don't you?" Victor's expression softened, or perhaps it was another perfectly crafted mask sliding into place. "I know, and I love you." He folded her into his arms, and Elena closed her eyes, imagining his downfall in exquisite detail. "I don't think I should drive tonight," she whispered, her voice muffled against his suit. "Can we order in?" "Of course, whatever you need." It was perfect, just as Paul predicted. They ate Thai takeout while a movie played, its images a meaningless blur. Victor's eyes kept darting to his phone, waiting for word from Marco that her car was ready to become her coffin. But the message he was waiting for would never come, because Marco was being watched, every move cataloged and filed. Every text, every call, every action was another nail in the coffin they were building for Victor. At 10 o'clock, Elena let out a theatrical yawn. "I think I'll go to bed. I'll be up soon, just have a few emails to send." She went to the bedroom and locked the door, then pulled out the burner phone. Her text was a single word. "Status?" The reply came back at once. "Marco made contact at 4:47 in the afternoon. Mechanic confirms payment received. We have video, audio, financial trail. The trap is set." Elena sat on the bed, the text glowing in the dark room. The trap is set. She had it. Undeniable proof that Victor had bought her death. She expected relief to wash over her. Instead, all she felt was a deep, glacial chill. Board meeting is Friday. Another message from Adrian lit up the screen. 3 days. Can you keep up the act for that long? 3 more days of this performance. 3 more nights next to a man who wanted her dead. 3 days in a part she had perfected for 2 years. Yes, she typed back. 3 days is nothing. Good. Get some sleep. You'll need it. Elena set the phone down and got under the blankets. An hour passed before Victor came in. His arm fell across her waist, his custom pulling her close in a pantomime of affection. Elena lay awake in the dark, her eyes staring into the void, ticking off the minutes until Friday. For the next 3 days, time itself seemed to hang in an eerie, suspended state. Elena moved through the house like a specter, performing her part with a cold, flawless accuracy. She returned Victor's smiles. She ate the meals he served. She swallowed the false prenatal pills and feigned sleep whenever he was near. Each night, once his breathing fell into the deep rhythm of slumber, she met with Adrian's people. They rehearsed her testimony for the board, polishing her delivery, her rhythm, and the precise moment to reveal the evidence that would shatter her husband. Margaret's order was to remain cold, to let strategy conquer all feeling. He will lash out, Margaret warned. The outburst will be vicious. He'll paint you as unhinged, using the pills as his proof. You must be braced for it. I'm ready. Are you sure? Adrian's voice cut in. Once you walk into that room, there's no going back. Victor will know you betrayed him. The Castellanos will know. You are making yourself a target that will remain long after this is over, win or lose. Elena held his gaze. I already have a target on me. The difference is now I'm holding the gun. A change flickered in Adrian's eyes, a glint of admiration, or maybe the recognition of a kindred spirit. Then you had better not miss, he advised. Victor came home late on Thursday night. He found Elena in his study, sitting at his desk, examining company files he'd left out. She had spent her nights relearning the details of the empire her father built, the one she had ignored through a medicated fog. Elena. He stood in the doorway, completely taken aback. What are you doing? Reading, she said, her reply swift. I've realized how little I know about this company. It's time that changed. Victor stepped into the study warily, as one might approach a wild, unpredictable animal. You should be resting. The baby is perfectly fine, and I am sick of being useless, Elena snapped back, collecting the papers. My father gave his life to this company. The least I can do is understand it. For an instant, a flash of pure suspicion crossed his features before he constructed a smile. Of course, that's wonderful. I can help you with the more difficult parts. That won't be necessary. I'd rather do this on my own. She brushed past him, the documents clutched to her chest, feeling his eyes on her back all the way up the stairs. That night, sleep eluded Victor. Elena felt him beside her, starkly awake, his mind churning, trying to solve this sudden, unnerving twist in the plot. Let him struggle with it, she thought. Let him choke on the same terror he fed to me. Friday dawned under a grim slate-gray sky. Elena dressed in one of her mother's navy power suits, the last piece of her old self she had pulled from the pharmaceutical haze. Her hair was swept up, her makeup muted, and she wore pearl earrings like tiny hard facts. She was an heiress today, not a decorative spouse. Victor was waiting downstairs. He watched her descend, a deep line in his brow. You're dressed for business. Are you going somewhere? A meeting with the board, she said, her tone like ice as she poured her coffee. An emergency board meeting. Did I forget to tell you? A dead quiet settled over Victor. His answer was clipped. No, you didn't. I apologized. It was called suddenly. A few minority shareholders have concerns about quarterly numbers. She sipped her coffee, her eyes locked on his over the cup's porcelain edge. It's probably nothing. Who called the meeting? I'm not entirely sure. Margaret Chen's office reached out yesterday. They said it was urgent. A muscle flexed in Victor's jaw. Margaret Chen is Adrian Keller's lawyer. Is she? I had no idea. Elena set her cup down. Is that a problem? No, not at all. But he was already turning away, phone in hand, hissing into it as he scrambled to learn what was happening. Elena finished her coffee, grabbed her purse, and walked the door. Elena. Victor's hand shot out, a hard grip of ownership on her arm. I'm coming with you. That's not necessary. I'm going. His hold was like steel and promised a bruise. Elena's eyes moved from his hand to his face, and she saw it clearly for the first time. Not the act, not the practiced charm, just raw, unfiltered terror. Fine, she said, her voice a perfectly laid trap. We'll go together. The drive was a silent war, his knuckles bone white on the steering wheel while Elena watched the rain-lashed city streak by. Up ahead, the Moretti shipping building loomed like a tombstone, her father's monument of steel and glass. The boardroom was on the top floor. She'd been there only once since he died, at the meeting that made Victor interim CEO. She had been a ghost in the corner while they tore her inheritance apart. Today was different. The air in the room was thick with tension, already filled with the board members, old men in expensive suits who had known her since she was a girl. Antonio Castellano, a predator with silver hair, presided at the far end. Adrian Keller was a dark shape against the stormy windows, his head turned the instant Elena entered, their gazes meeting for a heartbeat. She walked straight to the head of the table to her father's chair and saw Victor's composure shatter as he finally understood. Margaret Chen stood. Thank you all for coming. This meeting was requested by Elena Moretti, the majority shareholder and rightful CEO, to address grave concerns about corporate governance. Victor shot to his feet. This is a farce. Elena isn't in any condition to... I am in precisely the right condition, Elena's voice cut through his, sharp as a shard of ice. This is my company, my father's legacy, and I have proof that you have been systematically bleeding it dry for the last 2 years. Chaos erupted in the room. Voices clashed. Antonio Castellano's face went dark, and Victor roared over the noise. This is insane! Elena, you're sick. The stress of the pregnancy. There is no pregnancy. A silence fell over the room, as final as a blade's drop. Elena stood, opened her file, and began sliding papers across the polished wood. Victor has been paying a disgraced doctor to inject me with hormones that fake the symptoms of pregnancy. His plan was to make me seem unstable, easier to control, and eventually easier to get rid of. That's a monstrous lie. Victor's voice was hard as stone. Elena is taking prescribed anxiety medication. Dr. Stephen Hammond lost his license in New York 3 years ago for prescription fraud, Margaret stated. We have proof of cash payments from Victor Moretti to him starting the month after their wedding. We also have a recording of Victor planning his wife's murder to get her inheritance. She pressed play on a device. and Victor's voice filled the silent room. A car accident, she's on those pills, her reflexes are slow. A rainy night, a tight corner, all it needs is a small mechanical failure. Elena watched the blood drain from her husband's face. The pregnant, unstable Elena Moretti spins out of control, a tragedy, absolutely devastating. Antonio Castellano was on his feet. "Where did you get this?" "Straight from the source," Adrian said from the window. "In his own study, plotting a murder like it was just another business deal." The facade Victor wore crumbled completely. He whirled on Elena, the monster inside finally breaking free. "You recorded me? You set me up? You were going to have me killed." Elena's voice was quiet, but her words hit with the force of a hammer. "You faked a child, you drugged me, and you planned to murder me, so yes, I recorded you. I have proof of everything, and now everyone here knows exactly who you are." "You have no idea what you've just done," Victor seethed, his hands shaking with rage. "The Castellano merger is built on fraud and attempted murder," Margaret cut in. "That makes it void. It also opens every party involved to conspiracy charges." Antonio's eyes narrowed. "This is a setup. Keller planned this whole thing." "I didn't have to plan anything," Adrian replied. "Victor gave me everything I needed the moment he chose murder over divorce. I'm just here to watch the fire." The room exploded. The board members screamed for answers. Antonio and Victor were in a panic, and Margaret calmly handed out more proof. Bank statements, emails, wire transfer confirmations. In the eye of the storm, Elena sat at the head of the table and watched her husband's world burn to the ground. Security had to be called to clear the room. They led Victor away, still yelling, still spinning lies. Antonio Castellano disappeared without a sound, phone glued to his ear as he called his lawyers. The board members filed out, shocked into silence, none of them able to meet Elena's eyes, until only she, Adrian, and Margaret were left. "That went roughly as planned," Margaret remarked, the snap of her briefcase latch echoing in the silence. The adrenaline drained from Elena, leaving a fine tremble in her hands. "What comes next?" she asked. "An investigation, fraud, attempted murder. Victor will fight, but the proof is overwhelming. He'll likely take a deal to avoid trial. And the company? It belongs to you again. Total control starting now. The board will object, but their position is legally baseless." Elena gave a slow nod, the words a distant echo. Her company, her father's life's work, hers. The triumph tasted like ash. After Margaret left with a promise to call, Adrian lingered, resuming his vigil by the window, watching the city sprawl beneath them. "You held yourself together," he noted. "I wasn't sure you had the steel for it." "I wasn't either. But you did. Now your goal is achieved." Elena watched him, seeing the quiet triumph in his eyes, and a chill snaked its way into her bones. "What do you want, Adrian?" He turned from the window. "The same terms. Moretti shipping for 50 cents on the dollar. And if I say no, you'll be in charge of a business you can't run, with directors who despise you, surrounded by enemies who now see you'll destroy anything in your way. Victor had influential friends, Elena. They have long memories. So I just give it up? Let you take what my father built? You won't give it up. You will sell it for a considerable price. In return, I'll provide the guidance and security you'll need for the storm ahead." A nerve in Elena's jaw tightened. "You planned all of this. This was never a rescue. It was just a corporate raid." "It was both," Adrian answered, closing the distance between them. You were sinking. You still are. This isn't the end, Elena. It was just the first move. And if I want to make my own moves, you will lose. He said it factually, without any cruelty. You're smart. You can be brutal. But you are not ready for this world by yourself. His words struck with the force of fact. She had ruined Victor, but only with the weapons Adrian had given her. Alone, she'd have been a drugged, ghost-like wife heading for an early grave, but she was a very fast learner. I have to think, she said. A faint smirk touched his lips. That's all I'm asking. He left her there, a monarch on an empty throne, clutching a salvaged inheritance and a future that was a void. Elena stared out at the relentless rain washing over the city, wondering if she'd merely swapped one prison for another. She couldn't return home. The house she'd shared with Victor was poisoned now, each space a shrine to his lies. Instead, she found a room in a city hotel, a nameless tower where money bought silence and no one cared who you were. She just sat there on the bed, still in her mother's suit, her gaze fixed on her silent phone. The phone screen was an inferno. 17 calls from Victor, 12 from blocked numbers, and 3 from her sister, Maria. In the chaos, she'd forgotten her. She called back. Elena! Thank God! Maria's voice was sharp with fear. I've been calling for hours. What is going on? A reporter had found her, asking about Victor and fraud accusations. It's complicated. Complicated, Elena? They're saying your husband tried to kill you. Elena shut her eyes, the raw truth hitting her again. He did. A deep quiet fell over the call. Then gently, I'm on my way. Where are you? Maria, I am okay. Where are you? Defeated, Elena texted her the hotel's location. 20 minutes later, a desperate hammering erupted at the door. It was Maria, their mother's exact image. She had the same raven hair, the same sharp eyes that missed nothing. Maria took in her sister's state instantly, pulling her into a hug so tight it hurt. You should have told me, Maria murmured, the second you knew. I couldn't. I didn't know who was safe. Me. You trust me. Maria stepped back, her hands firm on Elena's shoulders. Always. Understand? Elena nodded, the hard shell she had worn for weeks finally starting to crack. With Maria there, the weakness felt real, so she told her everything. The secret office, the recording, the fake pregnancy, the drugs, Adrian's murky help, the final showdown, and the look in Victor's eyes as his life burned to the ground. Maria listened to it all without a word, her face growing stormy. That animal, she spat when Elena was done. I'll deal with him. He's in custody. Margaret says the charges will stick. And this Adrian Keller, do you trust him? Elena paused. He's necessary. That's not what I asked. No, she admitted. I don't. But he helped when no one else would. Maria's jaw clenched. And what's his price? The company. He wants to buy Moretti Shipping. Absolutely not. Elena, that business is Dad's legacy. It's ours. You didn't survive that monster just to hand it to some other man who thinks you're a pawn. I don't know how to run it. On that point, Victor was right. Then you'll learn, Maria shot back, grabbing Elena's hands. You are 24, not dead. You can learn. And I'm here. I don't know shipping, but I know business, and I know a predator when I see one. Elena wanted to believe her, to think she could win without Adrian's protection, without trading one master for another. But doubt lingered, a small voice whispering she was out of her league. Stay with me tonight, she asked instead. I don't want to be alone. Maria agreed. I'm not going anywhere. They had room service deliver bland pasta, and cheap wine they barely tasted. For a short while, Elena got to be the little sister again. Not a widow, not a CEO, not the architect of her husband's ruin, just Elena. By 12 a.m., Maria was sleeping in the other bed. Elena lay awake, staring upward, plotting her next move. Her burner phone buzzed. It was Adrian. "We need to talk. My office, 10 a.m. tomorrow." Elena stared at the message for a long time, then typed a single word. Agreed. Sleep never came. At sunrise, the story exploded. Her own phone was drowning in notifications from news outlets, social media, and people from her past. It was everywhere. Heiress exposes husband's murder scheme. Boston executive arrested for fraud, attempted homicide. The Moretti marriage, a deadly fraud. The audio had been leaked. Not all of it, just the worst parts. Victor's cold, clinical voice planning her death like a business expense. Elena was on the bathroom floor, scrolling through the news, her personal nightmare now public spectacle. "You okay?" Maria was at the door with a coffee. "They are calling me brave," Elena said, her voice flat. "Heroic, a survivor. Like I had a choice." "You did have a choice. You could have run. You chose to fight." "I chose revenge." "Sometimes they are the same thing." Maria gave her the coffee. "When's your meeting with Keller?" 10. "I am going with you. That is not up for debate." "You're not facing that shark alone." Elena was too exhausted to argue. She showered, put on clean clothes Maria brought, and let her sister lead her into the lion's den. The office was just as she remembered, cold, modern, and built to make you feel small. Adrian was waiting in a meeting room with Margaret and a stranger, an older man around 60, whose face showed he'd seen it all and been impressed by none of it. "Elena, and you must be Maria," Adrian said, standing and offering a hand. Maria ignored it. "Skip the formalities. What do you want?" Adrian's smile was unnerving. "Direct. I like it. This is James Rutherford, the retired CEO of Atlantic Maritime. He has agreed to consult on the transition." "What transition?" Maria's voice was a blade. "The acquisition of Moretti Shipping by Keller Maritime, per my agreement with Elena." "Elena is not selling." Adrian's gaze shifted to Elena. "Is that true?" Elena's eyes moved from her sister to Adrian to the man meant to dismantle her father's legacy. "I haven't decided," she said, her voice clear. "I need more time." "Time is a luxury you do not have," Adrian's tone sharpened. "The story is out. The press is digging into your company. Your board is in chaos. Your investors are terrified. You needed stability yesterday." "What I need," Elena replied softly, "is to understand exactly what I've lost." Margaret's voice cut through the tension. "Moretti Shipping is currently valued near $200 million. As you agreed, Adrian's offer is $100 million, precisely half." Maria's retort was sharp. $100 million she's throwing away," Adrian countered, his tone like ice. $100 million that buys her next breath. Victor would have killed her without my help. This is the price of life." "It's extortion. It's business." Elena shot to her feet. "I need to see it. The company. I have to know what I'm giving up." Adrian's brow furrowed. "You've seen the headquarters." "I've seen a boardroom. I've sat in meetings while men talked through me. I've never seen the work, the ships, the routes, the men who make it all run." "I need to see it all before I agree to anything." "That could take weeks." "Then it takes weeks," Elena answered, her gaze locked on his. "You said I couldn't run this company. You might be right, but I won't sign away my legacy without understanding what it is." A heavy silence descended. Margaret's eyes darted to Adrian. Maria watched Elena, a flicker of pride in her expression. Adrian leaned back, studying Elena as if she were a new, unforeseen variable in an equation. 1 week, he finally pronounced. You have 1 week to see the operation, meet the staff, learn the basics. Then we close this deal. 2 weeks. 1 week, Elena, take it or leave it. Elena felt the urge to argue but saw the hard line he had drawn. Adrian's patience had been a performance, and the curtain had just fallen. 1 week, she agreed. Adrian rose. James will coordinate. He knows the business inside and out. Use him. Learn fast. The meeting ended in a blur of handshakes she barely felt and promises she wasn't sure she could keep. Driving back, Maria's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. You're actually considering it, she said at last, selling. I'm considering not being an absolute fool. Adrian's right. I don't know the first thing about any of this. So learn. You just bought yourself time to do it. A week isn't enough time to learn an empire. No, but it's enough time to decide if you want to. Elena just stared as the city lights streaked past the window. Somewhere across Boston, Victor was rotting in a jail cell, undoubtedly plotting his escape. Elsewhere, the Castellanos were containing the damage. And everywhere, her name was on people's lips, the innocent wife who had trapped her husband, the lost heiress who had claimed her throne. Only she hadn't, not really. She had only swapped Victor's cage for Adrian's leash, and now had to figure out how to cut them both. The tour began at 7 the next morning. James Rutherford arrived in a car that looked older than she was, and was probably worth more than her home. He was a man of few words, a fact for which she was deeply thankful. The tour of her birthright began at the shipyard south of the city, the beating heart of the Moretti fleet. She had never set foot here. Victor, that viper, had always spun some tale about it being too dangerous, too dirty for a lady. She saw the truth now. It was another wall he had built to keep her from her own power. The place was a leviathan, a war zone of cranes, shipping containers, and colossal ships in states of disassembly and repair. The air was thick with salt, diesel, and rust. Men in hard hats moved with the precision of an army, their shouts cutting through the mechanical roar. James simply handed her a hard hat and safety vest. Your father came here every week. He knew most of these men by name. Elena clipped on the vest, feeling like an actress stepping onto the stage of her own life. I don't remember that. You were just a girl, but they remember him, and they remember you. They started the walk through, James rattling off cold facts about tonnage, shipping lanes, and service schedules. Elena tried to absorb it, but the words were a foreign language, a code Victor had made sure she could never crack. A foreman with a face carved by years and wind approached them. Ms. Moretti, it's an honor. Thank you. I'm sorry, I don't recall. Dan Callahan, I worked with your father for 20 years. His eyes flicked to James, then settled back on her. We heard about your husband, what he tried to pull. I'm sorry for what you went through. Thank you. Your father would be so proud of how you handled that snake. That took real guts. A lump formed in Elena's throat. I don't know about that. I do. Enzo Moretti built this place on sheer nerve and grit. Looks like you got a double dose of both. Dan walked off before Elena could find a response. Surrounded by the concrete and steel kingdom her father had built, she felt its immense weight pressed down on her. He's not wrong, James said quietly. Enzo was the most stubborn man alive, refused to sell even when the market crashed in 2008. Said Moretti Shipping could survive anything. And did it? Just barely. He leveraged every penny he had, drowning himself in debt. A kingdom almost lost, a legacy salvaged by pure force of will, now being offered up as a prize to Adrian Keller. In the ensuing quiet, James gave her a grim assessment of the situation. Keller was the patient predator who had been circling for years. Her marriage to Victor was the first scent of blood in the water, her escape the second. His buyout would be a clinical dissection, stripping the valuable assets and burning what remained. To fight him meant declaring war on all fronts. A hostile board, haunted by Victor's influence, would turn on her. The Castellanos would demand blood, and she stood in the middle of it all, an exile in her own home. She saw only a trap, but James presented a startling alternative. She wasn't the prey, but the antidote. Elena's eyes demanded an explanation for this rewriting of her fate. He laid out the company's disease. Her father's empire ran on people, but Victor had turned it into cold data, bleeding it dry. Her strength was in being everything Victor was not. When she protested her own ignorance, James invoked her father's history. Leaders are made, not born. Her education started right there on the docks, a plunge into the soul of the company. By dusk, her brain was swamped with data, but under the exhaustion, a tiny spark had caught fire: curiosity. That evening, her hotel suite became a war room as she dove into the corporate anatomy of Moretti Shipping. It was a punishing marathon of self-teaching, pushing past physical limits with sheer mental will. Maria found her at 2 a.m, bathed in the blue light of financial statements. Elena's concentration was total. 4 days were left to choose between a comfortable exit with Adrian's money and a war for a legacy she was just beginning to understand. Maria's question cut straight to the bone. What was her gut telling her? When Elena confessed her terror, Maria didn't offer comfort but confirmation. Fear was a sign of awareness, not frailty. The rot was undeniable. Third-quarter reports revealed they had lost 2 major clients in the last 6 months, a direct result of Victor's toxic indifference. As Elena's doubts surfaced, Maria made a solemn vow. Then we learn how, together. An analytics genius, Maria became her code breaker, translating the suffocating wall of numbers into clear, actionable battlefield intelligence. The morning light exposed the full extent of the company's decay. This wasn't her father's creation. It was a corpse Victor had left behind. Maria's assessment was unforgiving. It could be saved, but it would require a battle, not a business deal. The notion of finding allies seemed impossible, with a board paralyzed by fear and old allegiances. So Maria suggested a mutiny, fire the old guard and build a new one. Elena pointed to her 2 years as a trophy wife as proof of her inadequacy, but Maria countered with her own stories of fighting men who wrote her off for being young and female. The question hung in the air, a reflection of Elena's own choice. Maria wasn't asking for a job. She was offering to be a partner in the fight, but only if Elena committed to it. With her own foundation stable, this was a far more compelling war. In that instant, the crushing solitude that had marked Elena's journey finally began to crack. When she asked if Maria would be with her, truly with her, the quiet reply, "I'm with you," was sealed with a handshake. It wasn't just hope. It was the first weapon drawn in a war that was now theirs to share. The following days were a crash course in corporate combat, a storm of strategy sessions and site visits. James led her through the corporate offices, introducing her to the key personnel who were the company's backbone. The allegiances were split. Some were loyalists, some were doubters, and some were hostile agents of Victor's former rule. Elena began her own cold assessment of power, sorting allies from enemies, determining which departments were sound and which were already lost. On the fourth day, flanked by Margaret and Maria, she faced the lawyers to witness the full scope of the ruin Victor had created. Counsel advised that the Castellano agreement was defunct, with a suit for contractual breach all but guaranteed. Their goal wasn't victory, but a campaign of financial exhaustion meant to exsanguinate the company. To capitulate would cost 10, maybe 15 million, alongside crippling terms. Elena saw it as extortion. The lawyer, with chilling pragmatism, saw commerce. A long legal conflict of similar expense was the alternative. Then Maria advanced a volatile third way, revealed the Castellanos' part in Victor's felonies. The room's tenor shifted at once. The attorney deemed it a catastrophically risky maneuver, citing the threat of illicit retaliation from the Castellanos. The decision became stark: submit to criminals or face complete ruin. As they weighed their choices, Elena understood the crushing gravity of leadership. This wasn't about freight and shipping lanes. It was a minefield where the only exits were insolvency or death. Adrian's offer resurfaced: $100 million for a clean escape, a simple surrender of this inherited war. But visions of her father's work, the fidelity of men like Dan Callahan, and Victor's sneering face countered the lure. "We will fight," she declared, silencing the room. "We will fight the Castellanos." It was the pronouncement of a new persona, a vow she was not Victor and would not be cowed. Over the lawyer's frantic objections, her conditions were absolute. They would never receive a single dollar. If they desired a war, they would have one. A slight predatory smile formed on Margaret's lips. "Acknowledged," was the response, as the machinery of war began to turn. Maria's later reflection on the decision captured its ambiguity. It was the most courageous or the most foolish thing she had ever witnessed, yet their father would have endorsed it. On the last day Elena met Adrian, the contract lay between them like a primed weapon. Answering his question, she admitted she lacked the skill to lead the company. But this was no concession. It was a declaration of purpose. She could be taught, and she was prepared to learn. Adrian's face was an inscrutable mask. "Perhaps it is a blunder," she parried, "but the right to make it is mine." Adrian insisted on practicality, placing her single week against her father's 40 years. Her counter was about will, not experience. She was not retreating, even if it meant losing everything. She had already faced that abyss once. Adrian leaned back, studying her, and recognized the ghost of her father's obstinacy, a quality he saw not as a virtue, but a hazardous opposition to change that had nearly destroyed the company before. And so he insisted operated on instinct, a combination that had almost been his undoing. And still, he survived, she pointed out. Adrian waved off barely as a luxury she could not afford given her compromised state. "You require leverage immediately." Her reply reordered their entire exchange. "Then educate me." She conceded her vulnerability, but rejected the sale. In place of a takeover, she offered a partnership. She would convert his predatory gaze into her primary weapon, using his long study of Moretti shipping to ensure her own survival. "A plan is needed to rescue this company from ruin. Your payment for this aid? A 20% share, a silent partner in the background. If we succeed, you become rich. If we fail, you are left with the wreckage." A deep quiet settled on Adrian. You could almost feel the gears of his mind turning, calculating odds, hunting for the trick. "That is not what we agreed upon," he finally said. "I know, but circumstances have changed, and so have I. This new proposal benefits us both more." "How so?" "Buy it now, and you get a broken firm with a hostile staff and a labyrinth of legal woes. Help me rebuild it, and you get a stronger asset, worth far more than your initial offer. Furthermore, you land a devastating blow against Victor. You can watch him rot in prison, knowing his wife not only survived but thrived." The faintest shadow of a smirk appeared on Adrian's face. "You are learning very fast. So, do we have an agreement?" "It is a consideration. I will need time to reflect." "You have until dawn. Then I move forward, with or without you." Elena stood, leaving the papers, and walked out before he could see the shake in her hands. She had just gambled her entire future on a version of herself she wasn't sure existed. She was done being the trophy wife, the coddled daughter, the woman no one took seriously. It was time to find out who Elena Moretti truly was. Adrian's call came the next morning before her coffee was even warm. 25%, he said, skipping all formality. "And I want a seat on the board." Her heart pounded, but her voice was like steel. 20%, and you can attend meetings as an observer with no voting rights. 23 with advisory capacity on all major financial moves. 22 advisory only, and your hours will be defined by contract. There was a brief pause, followed by a quiet, authentic laugh from Adrian. "You've been practicing. Maria was my coach. So, are we in business?" "We are in business. I'll have Margaret draft the revised agreement." Elena hung up, granting herself exactly 10 seconds to feel the heady surge of triumph and the cold reality of her bargain. Then she drank her coffee and got to work. That first month was a relentless baptism by combat. Elena took her father's old office in the Moretti shipping building, the corner suite with a view of the docks. But Victor's ghost was in every corner. His awards, his gaudy pens, a wedding photo that sickened her. She purged it all. Every trace of him was boxed up and escorted out by security like toxic waste. She filled the void with her own narrative. Her mother's painting of the ocean, her father's old compass, and a massive whiteboard that made the office a war room. Maria took the office next door and began a forensic audit of the company's books. After 1 week, she found 3 secret accounts Victor used to siphon money through shell companies tied to the Castellanos. "He took almost $2 million last year," Maria said, setting a file on Elena's desk. "Is it traceable? Can he be charged? Send it to Margaret. Add it to his tally of sins." "Done." "But Elena, this will provoke the Castellanos even more. They'll see this as an act of war." "Good. Let them. Maybe it will make them sloppy." Maria's gaze was laced with worry, but she said no more. She knew that arguing with Elena, once her mind was made up, was pointless. James Rutherford came by 2 times a week, schooling Elena on the essential operations of the shipping business. He taught her to read manifests, deal with harbor authorities, and know a lucrative route from a money pit. "You're picking this up much faster than I expected," he noted one afternoon, looking over her progress. "Is that a compliment?" "It's a fact. Most people need months for this. You've gotten the basics in a few weeks." "The basics aren't enough." "No, but it's a start." James pulled out another file. "We need to talk about your board problem." Elena had been avoiding this. Of the 12 members, at least 6 were actively working against her. They would come to meetings, systematically vote down her ideas, and then whisper to reporters about how she was running her father's company into the ground. I can't just fire them, she said, not without cause. You don't fire them. You outplay them. How? James pointed to the corporate bylaws she'd never read, the same rules Victor had twisted to seize power. Hidden inside were clauses for appointing new members, calling emergency votes, and ousting any director involved in corruption. 3 of them are already compromised, James said. They've taken bribes from competitors, a direct policy breach, prove it, show it to the board, and give them a choice: step down or face a full inquiry. And the others? Give them an ultimatum. Get on board with the new strategy or get out of the way as this company recovers. Once you prove you're capable, most will follow. The rest will make themselves scarce. Elena looked at the list of names. Men who knew her father, who watched her grow up, and who still saw a little girl in a big chair. I want them gone, she said. Every last one. Anyone who stood by and watched Victor bleed this company dry. That's half your board. Then I'll build a new one. I want people who believe in this company, not just in their own careers. Who do you have in mind? Elena had her own list, one she had been working on for weeks. Dan Callahan from the docks, 2 captains that James trusted, a supply chain guru Maria found, and an expert in sustainable shipping. None of these people have traditional board experience, James pointed out. Neither do I, but they know this business and they care about its people. That's the company my father built. That's what I'm bringing back. James just looked at her for a long, silent moment. You know, when you first asked for my help, I figured you'd last 3 weeks before you took Adrian's offer. I was wrong. You weren't the only one who thought so. And you? The faintest hint of a smile touched Elena's lips. Most of all. Writing the board took another month of strategic plays. Elena gathered her proof, built her argument, and laid it bare in a tense 4-hour meeting that ended with 3 forced resignations and 2 more storming out. The remaining members were left in a state of shock. This is entirely without precedent, noted Preston, an older man and an old friend of her father's. To overhaul the board with no real forewarning. I gave you a warning, Elena replied, her tone glacial. I told you all a month ago that a new era was dawning. Your mistake was choosing not to believe me. She then unveiled her new appointees, watching the old guards' faces as they grasped she had filled the room with actual experts, professionals who wouldn't question her based on age, gender, or supposed weakness. This is still highly irregular, Preston mumbled, his voice now a whisper. As was my husband's plan to have me killed for my assets. We are all adapting to irregular times. The meeting closed with her motions carried. A first since taking the chair. It was a victory, small but solid, but every victory comes with a price. 2 days later, Antonio Castellano walked into her office, completely uninvited. Her assistant's effort to stop him was pointless. He passed the woman like a phantom, settling into the chair opposite Elena's desk as if he owned the very floorboards. Ms. Moretti, we need to talk. Elena didn't stand or offer a hand. I have nothing to say to you. A shame, because I have a great deal to say to you. Antonio lounged back, the image of perfect calm. You've leveled some extremely serious charges against my people. Fraud, conspiracy, attempted murder. Those are heavy accusations. And they are 100% true. Victor worked with you to steal my company. I have the evidence. You have a tape of Victor Moretti, drunk and rambling. It's worthless. There is nothing that connects his pathetic fantasy to me. Antonio's gaze hardened. The money trail says differently. Money is fluid. Business dealings get tangled. You are a child in this arena, Ms. Moretti. You don't understand how the game is played. I understand you helped my husband plot my murder for a piece of my fortune. The idea is very simple. If I had truly wanted you gone, you would be gone. Antonio said it with the bland disinterest of a man discussing the weather. Victor was an arrogant, impulsive amateur. I told him the plan was a mess, but he was certain he could pull it off. A sliver of ice slid down Elena's spine. Is that a confession? It's a reality lesson. Victor was removed because he misjudged you. I won't make the same error. Is that a threat? It is an offer. Antonio leaned in. You are sinking. Your board is a joke. Your name is mud, and you collect enemies like a hobby. Let me help you. Help me. You just suggested that if you wanted me dead. But I don't. I want the Atlantic shipping lanes, and you will give them to me. For a fair price, of course. I'll pay market value, sign a long-term deal, and offer the political cover you'll need when the Victor mess inevitably goes public. Elena fought to keep her face a mask, dissecting his stunning proposal. Why would I ever work with the man who helped my husband try to kill me? Because I am the devil, you know. Because my power can make your legal problems vanish or multiply depending on my mood. Because in 6 months, when your board sees you're still failing, you'll be desperate. I can be your greatest asset or your worst nightmare. It is your choice. He rose, smoothed his cuffs, and smiled as if they'd just shared a friendly chat. Think about it. You know how to reach me. He left, leaving Elena in an office, suddenly silent, her heart hammering, her mind in a maelstrom. She immediately dialed Adrian. Castellano made an offer, Adrian's voice stated the moment he picked up. What kind of offer? Elena repeated the terms exactly. A long, heavy silence echoed over the line from Adrian's side. He is testing for cracks, he finally said. Victor thought you were fragile. Castellano is just checking the theory. What's my next move? Refuse him. Publicly, if you can. Make it clear you will not play his vicious game. And when he strikes back, we will handle that when it happens. But Elena, you cannot show weakness. Not to him, not to anyone. The second you hesitate, you lose everything. After hanging up, Elena stared at the harbor, watching ships haul cargo, money, and the immense burden of her father's legacy. A weariness deep in her bones took hold. She was tired of the fight, of constantly having to prove herself, of the fear that every decision could be the one that burns it all down. But to give in was to concede, and she had already lost too much. She drafted her reply to Castellano. It was short, formal, and final. Moretti Shipping would not consider a partnership with his group, now or ever. She sent the message and braced for impact. The storm hit faster than she expected. Within a week, 2 of Moretti Shipping's biggest clients terminated their contracts. No explanation was offered, just a clause ending deals that were years old. Maria found the connection. Both companies owed a fortune to Castellano Financial Services. And guess who just called in their markers? He's putting us in a chokehold, making an example. He's showing the world what happens when you say no to Antonio Castellano. A clean, cold fury rose in Elena. Can we survive losing them? For now, yes. But if we don't replace that income, and fast, we won't make payroll. Then we replace it. James, call in every favor you have. Find me new clients, new routes, anything to stop the bleeding. James looked doubtful. That's a tall order. The word on the street is that Moretti Shipping is already taking on water. Nobody gets on a ship they think is sinking. Then we'll show them this ship is sound. Where are we strongest? Our European roots. They've always been solid. Your father built those relationships himself. They survived even Victor's disastrous tenure. Then that is where we will fight. Offer them better deals, faster transit, whatever it takes. We need to prove we are here to stay. The battle to recover the lost business became a 3-week siege. Elena worked 16-hour days, sitting through meetings with men who saw her as a girl and fielding predatory offers from rivals who smelled blood. She was desperate, but became an expert at hiding it. Adrian's help was more critical than Elena wanted to admit. He opened doors, vouched for her name, and would sometimes just appear at a meeting, his formidable presence alone changing the tone. His reputation was spotless, and his support forced people to listen, but it also started rumors. "Are you two involved?" Mariah asked one night when they were both past exhaustion. Elena glanced up from a chart. "What?" "Adrian Keller. The gossip is everywhere about how much time you spend with him, how he's always in your corner, and the way he looks at you." "And how does he look at me? Like you're a puzzle he can't decide whether to figure out or to smash into 1,000 pieces." A brittle laugh escaped Elena. "That feels unnervingly correct. But you're not sleeping with him?" "No. Why would that even be a question?" "Because that's exactly how Victor used to look at you, and we all know how that story ended." The words hit harder than Maria could have meant them to. Elena put the papers down, rubbing her temples. "Adrian is not Victor," she said, her voice quiet. "Are you sure, or is he just better at hiding it?" Elena had no answer. In the end, they got the contracts. It was enough to steady the company to show they could survive Castellano's attack. At the next board meeting, Elena presented the new deals and saw the doubt in their eyes finally shift into something like respect. "A good showing," James said to her later. "You may yet survive this calamity." May? The storm has not passed, but your ship is still intact? That is far more than any of us believed you could manage. Elena absorbed the praise. That night, she re-entered the house, a place she had avoided since it all began. She'd been taking refuge with Maria or at her office, but she needed supplies, papers, clothes, and maybe a final severing of ties. The home was a tomb, every room a shrine to the naive girl she once was, a wife who gave her trust freely and paid an unbearable price. Methodically, she gathered files, outfits, and her mother's jewels from the safe. As she turned to leave, her eyes fell on Victor's desk drawer, the one he always kept locked. Its lock was shattered, a casualty of the official investigation. Within sat a folder she had never seen, labeled simply EM Personal. Her hand shook as she opened it. Inside were candid shots from their wedding, not the formal staged portraits. In each one, Victor stared into the lens, while she gazed at him with a devotion that now made her sick. Beneath them lay papers, medical files from a Dr. Hammond detailing hormone treatments, tranquilizers, strategies for psychological fracturing, and a meticulous schedule for her intended deconstruction. At the very bottom lay a single note in Victor's handwriting: insurance, in case she develops the wit to become a liability. Elena stared at the line, the monstrous reality of it all cementing in her mind. Victor had chronicled his own conspiracy, not as a confession, but as an arsenal to use against her should she ever fight back. He would have painted her as unhinged, the drugs a necessity, her claims the ravings of a broken mind. He'd built a prison inside a prison, one she nearly entered willingly. But Adrian moved first. The tape, the proof, the public humiliation. It all broke before Victor could cash in his policy. That meant Adrian knew. He had understood Victor's vile endgame better than the man who created it. Elena grabbed the folder, put it in her box, and walked out of that house forever. She drove straight to Adrian's building. The hour was late, but she knew he would be there. The man was pathologically devoted to his work. His assistant was gone, so Elena walked right into his office. He was poring over documents, his head snapping up as she entered. "Elena, what's wrong?" She dropped the folder onto his desk. "You knew about Victor's backup plan, the manufactured medical file, this insurance. You knew he was going to have me declared insane if I ever stood up to him." Adrian's eyes flickered to the folder, but he left it untouched. "Yes." "How long?" "I knew before we ever met." Just imagine, for 3 solid years, Adrian had watched Victor, aware of every cold, premeditated action. In that moment, Elena's world cracked open. 3 years? You've been watching all this time? "I was waiting for the right moment," Adrian stated. "The perfect leverage. You gave me both." Elena's voice faltered. "I gave you—" She'd gone to him as a last resort, but she had been a pawn in his game from the start. This whole alliance, his help, their partnership, all a calculated play to destroy Victor and seize his empire. Adrian stood slowly. "That is not the complete picture." "Isn't it? Which part is a lie, the part where you played me or the one where you let me think I had a choice?" He replied. "You always had a choice. You could have run." She shot back. "Because you made it seem like the only one." "It was the only choice that left you with your dignity," he countered, his voice turning to ice. "Yes, I knew Victor's plan. And yes, I positioned myself to profit from your disaster. But I also kept you alive. I gave you the weapons to destroy the man who wanted you gone. I helped you reclaim what was yours. That has to be worth something." She was unmoved. "Its worth was you getting everything you wanted while I thought I was controlling my own fate?" "You were," he insisted. "I simply made sure you had the information to make the right moves." A violent urge surged through Elena to scream, to break something, to feel an emotion other than the crushing weight of this fresh betrayal. She shot back. "Were you ever going to tell me?" he replied. "Perhaps when you were ready to hear it." "Stop." The word was a razor. "Don't act like this was some kindness. You saw an opening and you took it. I was just the tool you used to get what you wanted." "You are much more than that." "Oh, really? Or am I just another piece you're moving around your damn chessboard?" Adrian became utterly still. When he finally answered, his tone was softer than she'd ever known it. "At first, yes, you were a means to an end." He paused. "But you became an unforeseen variable, Elena." The way she bent but didn't shatter, the way she fought back, the speed at which she learned the game. He never saw it coming. Most people would have crumbled. "And what does that change?" she asked. "It changes everything. Because you're not a tool anymore. You're a player. That's what makes you so dangerous." Elena searched his gaze, hunting for the lie, the strategic advantage behind this sudden honesty. "I don't trust you," she said at last. "Good. You shouldn't. Trust is a weakness for people who live simpler lives." "Then why are we doing this?" she demanded. "Because we need each other. Because together we are an untouchable force. Because, like it or not, our fates are now linked. Do you think the Castellanos see a difference between us? To them, we're one target." And he was right, damn him. Elena despised him for being right. "Fine. I want total transparency, she ordered. No more secrets, no more games. Her first term was complete honesty. Immediate notification of any danger to her or her assets. Agreed. Second, their partnership agreement needed a total overhaul. Equal say on all major decisions was mandatory, revoking Adrian's sole power over Moretti shipping. A faint smirk played on Adrian's lips. Now we're talking business. He consented that Margaret would draft the new terms. Elena held the folder like a shield. I am not your instrument, Adrian, and I am not your pawn. We move forward as equals. Equals. Adrian offered his hand to seal their new contract. I can live with that. Elena waited a moment, assessing his hand before she took it, sealing an alliance forged from strategy, not faith. She was learning a brutal truth. Trust was a liability, but power was essential to live. For the first time since it all began, Elena Moretti finally had some. The new contract came in 3 days. She read every clause twice before signing. Maria watched, later voicing her apprehension in private. A piece of paper doesn't make you his equal. Adrian has lived in this world his whole life. You've had 6 months of training. I know, but I learn fast, Maria replied. That's what worries me. Elena knew what she meant. The person she was becoming, clinical, strategic, always looking for an angle, was a stranger. The woman she used to be wouldn't know her. But the woman she used to be was meant to be erased. This new version of her was still standing, a victory she refused to relinquish. The following months passed in a calm that felt like a lie. Elena ran the company with Maria's guidance and Adrian's occasional input. The tenor of board meetings changed as her confidence grew. The company's profits steadied, then started to rise, shaping Moretti Shipping into a legacy her father would have been proud of. Victor's trial was set for early spring. Margaret's updates were promising. The case was solid, conviction all but assured. Victor's defense was already pushing for a plea deal, aiming to reduce attempted murder to lesser charges. They're offering 15 years, Margaret said over the phone. With good behavior, he could be out in 10. A cold sickness washed over Elena. 10 years. Victor would be 45 when he got out, with a lifetime left to scheme, to ruin someone else. What if we refuse the deal and go to trial? She asked. Then you testify. You'll be made to relive everything in public while his lawyers tear you apart. They'll use the drugs to paint you as erratic, to plant doubt in the jury's mind about everything you say. But we have his confession on tape, which they'll argue was illegally recorded in his home without consent. A good attorney might get it thrown out, and our case would be severely damaged. With her eyes shut, a familiar rage began to simmer inside Elena. Could he truly escape the consequences? He won't be acquitted, but his time could be far less than what justice demands. It's a failing of our laws. I'm sorry. The call ended, leaving Elena alone in her office, her eyes seeing nothing. After the nightmare, the careful plotting, the public ruin of Victor's legacy, he might still secure a partial win. The inequity was a physical blow. But she was learning justice was an idea. Power was the only thing that was real. She called Adrian. I need to make certain Victor is locked away for the absolute maximum time. What must be done? His answer was stark. Your testimony. You must get on that stand, paint a picture of his crimes for them, and make them recognize the monster. Margaret says his defense team will tear me to pieces. They will certainly try, Adrian allowed. But you have a strength they cannot comprehend. One Victor never saw. A beat of silence. The real question is, can you endure that kind of war? Elena's thoughts flew to the woman who had stood, shaking, outside that study, hearing her own death being planned. That woman was broken, barely holding on. The woman she was today would burn the courthouse down to see Victor pay. Set up a meeting with the prosecution. I'm testifying. Elena, I am testifying, she repeated, and I will make certain every soul in that room knows exactly what he is. The preparations were their own special kind of torment. Day after day with the district attorney dissecting every detail, every moment, every piece of evidence. They had her listen to the recording again and again until Victor's voice was carved into her mind. Elena Moretti, pregnant, unstable, loses control of her car in a storm, tragic, utterly heartbreaking. With every replay, a part of her soul turned to ice. Maria attended each session, taking her own notes, asking questions the lawyers missed. She was assembling her own dossier, her own blueprint of the conspiracy. You know what I can't get past? Maria mused late one night. How long he must have been orchestrating this, the pills, the fake pregnancy, the accident. That level of forethought takes months of work, possibly years. What are you getting at? Maria said plainly. My point is, he was planning your murder long before you knew you were in any danger. That isn't just cruel, Elena. That kind of patience is a special kind of terrifying. The implication struck Elena with force. You think Adrian is just like him. I think Adrian watched Victor dismantle you for 3 years and did nothing until he saw an opportunity for himself. That's also patience. And that's also terrifying. He saved my life, Elena thought. He saved his asset. You were just the tool. Maria grasped her hand. I'm not telling you to cut him off. I'm telling you to never, ever lose sight of the man he is. I haven't forgotten. But sometimes late at night discussing tactics or as he explained maritime statutes, Elena wondered if she was beginning to. As a result, their alliance was shifting into something new, a connection she could not yet name. Adrian remained the model of professionalism, never once crossing a line. And yet, there were moments, a hand on her arm steadying her in a tense negotiation, the way his eyes would linger on her after she pulled off a masterful business play, the sharp, protective tone he used if anyone dared challenge her. It felt like something. Elena just had no clue what it was, and no time to analyze it. The trial loomed, consuming all of her attention. Her arrival at the courthouse was a media frenzy, a storm of reporters and flashing cameras that cast her as the unwilling lead. She wore a severe black suit Maria had chosen, a far cry from the soft colors Victor had demanded. Margaret stood waiting on the courthouse steps. Are you prepared? Not in the slightest, but I am here anyway. The courtroom looked like a set piece from a legal thriller, heavy wood, high ceilings, the entire space projecting an aura of institutional power. And there was Victor at the defense table, appearing pathetic in his orange jumpsuit, but still not nearly pathetic enough. His gaze met hers across the room, and for a heart-stopping second, Elena saw the man who had held her while she grieved for a child that never existed, the man who swore it would all be okay. Then she remembered his voice on the recording, and just like that, the illusion shattered. The prosecution called her name almost immediately. Elena laid her hand on the Bible and spoke the oath. The prosecutor, a woman in her 40s, named Chen, unaffiliated with Margaret, had forged a reputation for destroying domestic abusers. She walked Elena through the timeline, her voice soft but her questions like a wrecking ball. The marriage, the pills, the night in his study. Can you tell the jury what you heard? Elena took a slow breath. I heard my husband laying out the plan to have me killed. He was talking about the timing, the method, how to frame it as a sorrowful accident. He referenced the non-existent pregnancy he had created, the drugs he was feeding into my system. He spoke about it as if her voice broke, as if I were a logistical problem, not a person, an obstacle to be removed. And what was her emotional state upon hearing this? She had felt terror, a profound sense of betrayal, and like an absolute fool for being so blind. An objection to her feelings was denied. Chen pressed on with her calculated inquiry, methodically building a portrait of Victor as a soulless, calculating predator. Then came the cross-examination. Victor's lawyer was the exact kind of snake Elena had braced for. A man in a costly suit with a plastic smile, the type who justifies his vile work as just a job. Mrs. Moretti, you were on several prescription drugs, correct? I was. On pills from my husband's associate, who had no medical license. But you chose to ingest them. I chose to believe my husband when he said they were for my anxiety. I had no idea their purpose was to make me more suggestible. Were you ever treated for an anxiety disorder before you were married? No. So this issue just happened to emerge after you wed Mr. Moretti. Elena saw the snare he was laying. The anxiety appeared when he started to drug me. Or could it be that the pressure of running a company while mourning your parents caused real health problems that you needed medication for? No. I was managing before Victor began his scheme. For a brief moment, the attorney's smooth demeanor cracked. That sounds rather theatrical, Mrs. Moretti. Do you have medical proof these prescriptions were damaging? Margaret stood up. The prosecution has already submitted Dr. Hammond's sworn statement, which confirms the drugs were meant to undermine Mrs. Moretti's mental stability. Dr. Hammond, who has his own legal issues and is probably trading his story for a better deal, the defense attorney shot back. The assault continued for another hour. They tried to paint Elena as unstable, a woman lost in delusion. They twisted her secret recordings into proof of some long-standing paranoia. But Elena refused to break. Against every smear, against every lie, she held firm. The broken wife was gone. A survivor, a fighter, the real Victor stood in her place. When she finally stepped down from the stand, her whole body shook with a mix of raw fury and bone-deep exhaustion. Her part was done. 21 days later, the verdict was delivered. Victor was found guilty on all charges: conspiracy, fraud, and attempted murder. He was sentenced to 1/4 century with no possibility of parole for 15 years. Elena wasn't in court to hear the judgment. She was in a meeting about Pacific shipping routes when the text came through. 25 years, Margaret typed. He'll be almost 60 when he's even considered for release. Elena messaged her thanks, put her phone away, and turned back to the meeting. The wind felt distant, a story about someone else. That evening, she drove to the docks, a place from her youth before the company became an empire. Sitting in the pier, she watched the massive ships move like ghosts across the black water, trying to feel something that fit the moment. Relief? Vindication? The only thing she could feel was a weariness that had settled deep in her bones, and a profound sense of being alone. I had a feeling I would find you here. Elena looked over. Adrian stood there, his hands in his pockets. His usual intensity dimmed, as though he'd actually left work at a decent hour. How did you know? It was an educated guess. This is where you come to think. She didn't bother asking how he knew that. Adrian's insight was absolute. It was what made him so formidable. He sat next to her, their shoulders almost touching, and for a long time they both just watched the water in complete silence. You've won, Adrian stated at last. Victor is caged. The company's secured. The Castellanos are in full retreat. Every objective is met. So, why does it feel like I've lost? Because your learning victory doesn't heal a wound. It just clears the board for the next play. Elena watched him, the architect of her salvation who served his own intricate design. And what is your next play? The usual: grow the empire, forge new bonds, stay 10 steps ahead. And my role in this grand design. Adrian's eyes found hers, and something in them shifted, a glint of an expression that felt disturbingly real. That is the great paradox, Elena. You have no role. You were never meant to be a peer. You were never meant to challenge me, to make me doubt my own careful machinations. Yet you have. Is that a complaint? It is an observation. He paused. I've thought about our pact, the equal stake, the absolute transparency. Anyone else would have taken the money, but you fought for control. It was magnificent. You were a capable teacher. I gave you the rules. You mastered the art of it alone. A warmth bloomed in Elena's chest, a feeling as beautiful as it was lethal. Why tell me this now? So you understand what you are. You are not the terrified girl from the warehouse. You have become a power to your enemies, to the Castellanos, and to me, if I were ever to falter. Should I worry about that? That you see me as too great a power? A genuine smile touched Adrian's eyes. You should always be worried. That awareness is what has kept you alive. He stood, offering her his hand. Elena accepted it, his touch a shock against the cool air, and she wondered when their business arrangement had started to feel like something else entirely. There's something I need you to see, Adrian said. In my office, if you'll come. Elena knew she should refuse to hold the line she had fought so hard to draw, but she went with him anyway. At this late hour, Adrian's tower was a silent giant, home only to guards and ghosts. They rode the elevator to his floor, passing the rooms where they'd plotted Victor's ruin, and stepped into his private study. He handed her a folder. Inside were deeds and transfer papers, a stack of legal documents she couldn't immediately decipher. What is all this? The house, your old house. I assume you don't want it. I've had it valued and prepped for sale. But before it's listed, you have a choice. A choice about what? To reduce it to ashes. Elena's head snapped up. Adrian's face was perfectly grave. I bought the neighboring lot 6 months ago. If we level both structures, the combined land value skyrockets. We could build something new, or we can just wipe it off the map, leaving nothing but dust. Your call. You're serious. Completely. That place is a monument to every violation Victor committed against you. I thought you might want it gone. Elena looked down at the paperwork, at the address of a home that was supposed to have been her future, the cage where she was drugged, broken, and almost murdered. The idea of watching it burn was a potent, intoxicating fantasy. When, she breathed, the moment you say the word. The demolition was set for 1 month later after Elena sent a team to salvage any last pieces of her former life. There was almost nothing she wanted. Victor's presence had poisoned every object. She took her mother's gardening shears from the shed and a single wedding photo of her parents from a box Victor never bothered to open. The rest was sold, donated, or discarded. On the day of the demolition, Elena stood across from the site with Adrian and Maria, watching the crews make final checks. The house looked smaller now, its power gone. It was just a building, not the prison she remembered. "Last chance to change your mind," Adrian murmured. "I haven't." The foreman gave the sign, and with a boom, the first wall collapses. A tremor running through Elena's body, then a second, and a third, until the building implodes in a storm of dust and splinters. As it disappeared, you could feel something inside her settle into place. This wasn't healing, it was closure. Victor's final symbol of power was now officially gone. Maria asked her how it felt. Her answer, "Like I can breathe again." They leave before the cleanup crew begins their work. Elena has a new world to run. Meetings, contracts, an entire empire. 6 months later, she stands before the company at the annual shareholder meeting. The room is packed. Board members, key investors, even dock workers have come for the address. A year ago, this would have terrified her. Now, she's perfectly calm. She talks about recovery, new trade routes, and a plan for the future. She speaks of her father's vision, but makes it clear they are building their own. She never says Victor's name. He is just a ghost rotting in a cell. The applause she receives is real. They no longer see a rich girl playing at leadership. They see a queen on her throne. Adrian stands at the back of the room, watching her with an expression that is part pride, part satisfaction, and part the possessiveness of a man who co-authored the victory. Later, they are in his car. Elena had abandoned her own. It was linked to too many bad memories. Now, Adrian drives her when their schedules merge. "Impressive speech," he says, merging into traffic. "Thanks. Maria wrote most of it." "Perhaps, but you delivered it. That's all that matters." They ride in silence, then Adrian's voice drops. "Listen, there is something I have to tell you." And just like that, Elena's walls go back up. "What is it?" "Do you recall asking if I planned everything from the beginning?" "I recall you saying you did." "Well, there is another layer to that story." Adrian's gaze never left the road. "I wasn't just watching Victor. I was watching your whole family, specifically your father." A cold dread snaked down Elena's spine. "Why?" 20 years ago, your father took a massive contract from my father's company. The loss ruined him. My father died trying to recover. The man was seeking vengeance against my father, against Moretti Shipping, against the name that destroyed mine." Adrian's jaw was a hard line. "My whole plan was to wait until your father was at his weakest, and then I would destroy him. But he died before I got the chance. That business with your parents." Elena's heart stopped. "What about it?" Adrian finally met her eyes, and they were utterly empty. "It wasn't a business trip, Elena. I had their car tampered with. I'm the one who caused their deaths." And there the world broke. Elena couldn't draw a breath, couldn't think, her mind just ceasing to function. Her parents, the crash that had destroyed her life and thrown her to a wolf like Victor, Adrian, it was all him. "Stop the car." Her voice was not her own. "Elena, stop this car right now." He swerved to the curb and she practically fell out. She took maybe 3 steps before her knees gave out and she hit the pavement. Her parents, her father's laugh, her mother's hands in the garden dirt, the way they used to look at one another like no one else existed. Erased, not by chance, but because Adrian Keller needed his revenge. She felt him standing above her. "I'm sorry, I know that means—" "Don't." Her voice was a raw, broken thing. "Don't you dare tell me you're sorry." She spun on him, a year of steel-clad control shattering in a second. "You killed them. You murdered my parents for a company, and then you used me. You made me think you were my savior when you were just— I was your savior. Every single thing I did to protect you from Victor was real. Only because you wanted to be the one to break me, not him." Adrian flinched because it was a truth he couldn't deny. At first, yes, that was the plan. But things changed. You changed them. "I don't believe a word you say." "Then believe this." He pulled an envelope from his coat and held it out. "I had this drawn up 3 months ago. I was waiting for the right moment, but there is no right moment. There is only the truth." Her hands trembled as she tore it open. Inside was a legal document signing over his entire share of Moretti shipping to her. A staggering 22% of the company handed back to her, no strings attached. "I don't want your company," Adrian says, his voice flat. "My war for revenge is done. All I want is—" He seems to lose the words. "For you to be free, not from me, not from another cage." Elena could only stare at the paper, at his signature, already making it legally done. "Why tell me now? Why not just disappear?" "Because you deserve the entire truth. Every piece of it. My entire relationship with you was built on a lie. I'm done with it. You need to know who I am and exactly what I've done. Then what happens to us is your choice. What happens to us is that I will never see you again. I know." Adrian's voice is hollow, but his eyes are screaming. "The transaction is finalized. My resignation will be on the board's table in the morning. Then I will be out of your life." He starts to turn. Elena stands rooted to the pavement, the documents clutched in her hand like a verdict. She holds absolute control of her company now, free from the web of Adrian's influence. A solitary empire she built. Yet the cost was steep. The man who saved her was the very architect of her downfall. She thinks of her father, the brawler. Enzo Moretti never backed down from a fight, but his climb left a wake of broken men like Adrian's father, crushed on his way to the top. There are no clean wins, no perfect saviors, only people making impossible choices and living with the wreckage. A new resolve settles in Elena as she straightens up. Her eyes lock onto Adrian, the man who engineered her parents' deaths and her own rise to power. "I can never forgive you," she states, her voice level, "not for what you did to them. I doubt I ever will." "I know," he says, "but I won't lose this company. I won't let their sacrifice be for nothing." Elena takes a sharp, steadying breath. "I will build something they would have admired, something that creates instead of demolishes. And you will help me." Adrian's head snaps toward her. "What?" "You owe me a debt that has no price. So you will spend your life trying to repay it. Your connections, your wealth, your talent for surgical cruelty, all of it will be used to help me reshape Moretti shipping into an instrument of good." "Elena, you don't want me anywhere near you." "I don't want you in my personal world," she clarifies. "But your skills are necessary. And you," she adds, "need a chance at redemption no matter how small." Her stare is a challenge, a silent war waged on the pavement. These are the new terms. Take them, or I will leak your name to the world, your reputation, your empire, every brick you've ever laid. I will burn it all to ash. Adrian just watches her, then gives a slow, grave nod. Done. I accept. And Adrian, if you ever lie to me again, if you try to control me or touch anyone I care about, I won't just ruin you. I will erase you from existence. Is that clear? Crystal. Elena walks back to the car, leaving him on the curb. A dense quiet hangs between them as they drive away. The rules of the game have been rewritten, and she doesn't know if she's a genius or a fool. The decision, however, was hers alone. A year passes. The foundation is real. Elena is at a lectern, speaking to a sea of reporters and donors about its mission. Adrian sits in the front row, his gaze unwavering on her. He has funneled half his fortune into this venture, no questions asked. It is his penance for a sin beyond absolution. Their relationship is purely professional. The gulf that separates them is vast and uncrossable. Elena uses his brutal efficiency but never lets herself forget the monster he is. Some days she feels only contempt. On others, she sees the guilt that hollows him out. Mostly, it is a bitter mix of the two. Maria's beside her on the stage, her new CFO, the only soul Elena trusts completely. The Moretti sisters forging a dynasty from the ashes. After the conference, Elena finds a quiet alcove and checks her phone. An alert from the correctional facility sits on the screen. Victor tried to send her a letter. The warden asks for her permission to forward it. Without pausing, Elena deletes the notification. She has no use for his explanations, his excuses, his pathetic pleas to remain relevant. He is a ghost from a past life, caged where he can cause no more pain. She is the future, not whole, not healed, and often not okay, but she is in control. Finally, utterly in control. Elena Moretti steps into the Boston night. The company is hers, her path is clear, and for the first time in what feels like a lifetime, so is her life. She had learned to spot the predators before they lunged, to command power without corrupting her own soul, and that survival sometimes meant making a deal with the devil and paying his price. The terrified, broken woman who once stood frozen before Victor's office would not even recognize the person she was now. And that, in the end, was the entire purpose of her ordeal.
From a criminal psychiatric standpoint, Elena Moretti's case presents a layered portrait of coercive control escalating toward instrumentalized homicide. What distinguishes this narrative is not merely the intent to kill, but the sophistication of the pre-murder conditioning. Victor does not target Elena through impulsive violence. He first dismantles her cognitive autonomy. He creates symptoms, prescribes interpretations, and manufactures dependency. This is a hallmark of predatory psychological domination. The victim is not simply weakened, she is made to doubt the legitimacy of her own perceptions. Victor's behavioral profile suggests traits consistent with narcissistic grandiosity fused with high-order manipulative planning. He appears to experience other human beings less as moral subjects than as extensions of his strategic environment. Elena is valuable to him because she provides access to capital, legitimacy, and inheritance. Her emotional life is relevant only insofar as it can be sculpted into compliance. Such offenders often prefer subtle methods because overt aggression risks premature exposure. Sedation, gaslighting, reproductive deception, and dependency rituals are far more effective than immediate force when the goal is long-term acquisition rather than momentary domination. The fabricated pregnancy is particularly instructive. It is not only a deceitful tactic, it is a method of identity capture. Pregnancy carries profound symbolic and neuropsychological weight. It reorganizes expectations, self-concept, future planning, and bodily attention. By inducing pregnancy-like symptoms through hormonal manipulation, Victor effectively invades Elena's anticipatory structure. She begins interpreting fatigue, nausea, and emotional vulnerability through the lens of emerging motherhood rather than criminal interference. This is elegant in a pathological sense. He transforms a developmental hope into a compliance mechanism. At the same time, the false pregnancy creates a secondary narrative that can later be used to explain instability, irrationality, or stress in public discourse. Thus, the reproductive lie functions both as emotional leash and future legal shield. It is also important to understand Elena's attachment to Victor before the discovery. Lay observers often misread such attachment as foolishness or denial. Clinically, that interpretation is insufficient. Victims of coercive psychological abuse often remain bonded to the abuser because the abuser has become the central interpreter of reality. He names the symptoms, arranges the treatment, defines what is normal, and frames the victim's distress as evidence that she needs him more. Under such conditions, attachment does not signal consent in any meaningful sense. It reflects a trauma-conditioned dependency loop. Victor is not only Elena's husband, he has positioned himself as her manager, translator, physician's proxy, and emotional authority. To reject him before the evidence becomes undeniable would require Elena to reject the entire explanatory framework of her recent life. That is cognitively and emotionally expensive. The overheard conversation in the study therefore acts as an acute disillusionment event. In trauma science, moments of undeniable threat confirmation can either overwhelm executive functioning or restore it with surprising speed depending on the person and context. Elena demonstrates the latter. Once Victor's intentions become explicit, ambiguity collapses. Her subsequent behavior is strikingly organized. She discards the medication, documents evidence, secures essential resources, exits the environment, and seeks strategic alliance. This suggests that the prior fragility was not intrinsic but induced. When the manipulative fog clears, latent competencies reemerge. This is a clinically significant reminder that apparent dysfunction in abused individuals may reflect environmental sabotage rather than fixed incapacity. Adrian Keller's role complicates the psychological field considerably. Elena turns to him because he offers strategic coherence. He is dangerous but legible. Trauma survivors often experience temporary stabilization in the presence of individuals whose motives, while self-serving, are visible and consistent. Compared to Victor's intimate betrayal, Adrian's ambition is easier to map. He does not pretend to be harmless. This relative transparency can feel safer than counterfeit tenderness. However, it is critical not to romanticize this dynamic. Adrian is not healing Elena. He is entering an already destabilized attachment system and providing instrumental containment. His usefulness does not neutralize his predatory capacity. Indeed, later revelations regarding Adrian's role in the death of Elena's parents confirm a pattern familiar in trauma repetition structures. The individual who appears during the survival phase is sometimes implicated in the original injury. Psychologically, this can be catastrophic because it collapses the final distinction between rescuer and perpetrator. Elena is forced to confront the fact that her life has been shaped by men whose motives were rooted in possession, revenge, or opportunism, even when those motives produce superficially protective outcomes. Such recognition can produce fragmentation, rage dysregulation, or nihilistic withdrawal. Elena instead moves towards strategic integration. This is perhaps the most psychologically sophisticated aspect of her development. Rather than clinging to innocence or dissolving into vengeance, Elena begins to relate to power analytically. She studies the company, the board, the financial infrastructure, the roots, and the legal vulnerabilities. She does not merely find her voice. She rebuilds operational competence. In therapeutic language, this resembles restoration of agency through reality-based mastery. She is not healed by affirmation. She is stabilized by literacy, financial literacy, political literacy, interpersonal literacy. She learns how systems work, and this knowledge reduces her susceptibility to symbolic domination. That is an important life lesson arising from the case. Agency is rarely restored by emotion alone. It is restored when a person can accurately read the structures that once overwhelmed them. The boardroom exposure of Victor is psychologically important because it reverses the direction of narrative authority. For months or years, Victor defined Elena for others: unstable, overwhelmed, dependent. In front of this board, Elena defines Victor instead: fraudulent, conspiratorial, homicidal. In doing so, she transforms private abuse into collective knowledge. Many survivors describe this as a turning point because abuse thrives in sealed relational spaces. Once the pattern enters institutional language, the abuser's interpretive monopoly fractures. Elena's evidence-based presentation is not simply a revenge act. It is a reallocation of credibility. Her later decision to testify at trial further deepens this reallocation. The defense attempts a predictable strategy, pathologizing Elena, invoking her medications, emotional state, and supposed instability. Such tactics are common in cases where coercive abuse precedes attempted murder. The abuser's best hope is often to preserve ambiguity around the victim's cognition. Elena withstands this by naming the manipulation precisely. Precision matters. Vague pain can be dismissed. Detailed explanation is harder to neutralize. Her testimony signals that she now trusts her own mind enough to present it publicly under attack. The creation of the foundation in the final phase suggests movement toward post-traumatic reorganization rather than simple revenge completion. Elena channels her experience into education, mental health support, and legal aid. This is significant because survivors exposed to systemic manipulation often seek not only justice but structural prevention. She is no longer interested solely in punishing Victor or containing Adrian. She wants to alter the environment that allows such men to thrive. Clinically, this reflects meaning reconstruction, one of the strongest predictors of long-term post-traumatic adaptation. The central lessons of Elena's case are stark. First, coercive abuse often begins with interpretive control, not overt violence. Second, counterfeit care is one of the most effective delivery systems for domination. Third, survival may require alliance with compromised individuals, but recovery requires boundaries that do not confuse usefulness with safety. Finally, empowerment does not mean becoming untouched by trauma. It means becoming capable of reading danger without surrendering authorship over one's own life. Elena Moretti's story is not the story of a naive woman who became strong. It is the story of a woman whose reality was professionally dismantled, who then rebuilt herself through evidence, strategy, and increasingly disciplined perception. Her most important victory is not Victor's conviction, though that matters. It is the restoration of internal authority. The men around her sought to own her body, her grief, her inheritance, and her narrative. In the end, the one thing they failed to keep is her mind.